Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Emily. I'm one of our admissions counselors here at Montana State. I'm going to be one of your co-hosts throughout this webinar. Before we dive right into the webinar, I did want to go over a little bit of housekeeping items for our webinar. So if at any point you can't hear me or are having or sound a little bit fuzzy, please feel free to join via your phone with those numbers below. We also will be recording this presentation and we will send it via email to you if you have registered. If you need to leave the webinar at any point, don't worry, we will send you an email with the information. And then for this webinar, we are using a Q&A feature. So the Q&A is kind of like a chat feature, but it's where you can ask questions and somebody from our staff will answer them for you. To make sure everybody can utilize the Q&A feature, it is in the bottom right corner of your screen. There's 3 little dots. You can open the Q&A feature up, and just to make sure everybody is utilizing the Q&A or knows how to use it, feel free to drop where you're joining us from tonight. And then we'll move right along. So tonight's agenda, we are going to be covering what to expect for the new 2025-26 FAFSA. We're going to be talking about scholarships opportunities for both in-state and out-of-state students. And then we will also cover what financial services Montana State can offer you as a student and a family member. But I do want to introduce 2 of our other co-hosts this evening. Tonight you'll be hearing from James, who is our director of our financial aid office, and you'll be hearing from Keith, who is from our office of financial education as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this presentation over to Keith, and I will see you towards the end for our Q&A section.
Great. Thank you, Emily. Appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. Good to have you out there in the webinar land. We're glad to be with you tonight and hopefully answer some questions for you and stimulate your interest in Montana State University. So the next slide, please. All right, we're going to start with just talking about some of the scholarships that are available to you, both as in-state and out-of-state students. So if you can jump to the next slide. This is kind of just a recap. We're going to hit each one of these areas here in the next 3 slides. But I think the thing to note here is that as a incoming freshman, you're using your current and your high school GPA to establish eligibility for the recruitment scholarships, the Premier Achievement Awards. And so you have a chance to update those as those change. But those high school GPAs are what lock you into the award that you get with both the Premier and Achievement as we talk through those. But the reported one that you do to admissions, if that changes, there is a path for you to be able to do that. And then we will be able to kind of move forward and see if that changes your eligibility. No, you're good. On to the next slide. So what you're seeing here is for Montana residents. These are the scholarships available to you as a Montana documented resident. Our Premier Scholarship is the base Premier Award based on your high school. Those are 4-year renewable awards, and they range based on that GPA from 1,000 to 4,000 a year. And that is given to you, dedicated on that. And those awards are already going out. So if you've been an admitted student and meet any one of those criteria, you should or already have a letter regarding that offer in the mail to you. That offer comes with an acceptance process and a letter there for you to return that. So please do that if you have that. That letter says on it what the conditions and the parameters of the awards are for getting it dispersed and for getting it renewable. But those are basically that you have to attempt at least 30 credits a year and maintain a 2.5 GPA to maintain that while you get that. So look at that. The next one down is called the Hillman Scholars Program. I'm going to leave that for Keith a little bit later. He has a slide and he can talk a little bit more about that process because that's kind of by invitation only, but Keith will elaborate that on that a little bit later when we get to his part of the segment. The next one down is the Montana University system. So not the Montana State system or school, but the Montana University system for your residents. This is an honor scholarship that they provide to qualified high school graduates. And so there's an application process for that, and you need to apply through the MUS system to to be able to do that. That is an application separate from that. Your high school should be able to direct you to that, or you can Google and look for the MUS scholarships and look for the honor scholarship, and you should be able to find the application for that. So on top of that, you get a good amount of full tuition. It's full tuition waiver rather than part of the tuition waiver like the Premier, and you can use that kind of as you go with an additional stipend from MSU for offering that. So that's our kick in for that. The last one you'll see there is the MSU Treasure State Scholarship. That is for first generation students. You get a $1,500 renewable award on top of the Premier award. And that is for students whose neither of your parents or parent have completed a four-year college degree. And that's also be taken directly from your admissions application. There's nothing else you need to do for that. And we will kind of make those decisions and see those as they come in from your application. So look for communications on any of those if you fall into any of those buckets, and we'll kind of move forward with those. Next slide, please. These are the awards for out-of-state students. The achievement is the award that is based on your admissions application and again through your high school GPA. And you'll see the ranges there. Those go from anywhere from 7,000 to 16,000 based on that GPA. Like the Premier, this achievement, it goes toward tuition only. So the amounts that you see there will reduce tuition. When we talk about different scholarships and doing different things, there are a few awards here at Montana State that are tuition only awards. So waivers kind of generally only go toward tuition, as well as our Premier and Achievement awards. So if tuition is paid by some other way through a presidential or the MUS honors, then that tuition is already paid, and these would not stack on top of that. But many other awards and scholarships like the First Gen award and the Treasure would be stackable on top of each other for that. So we just have to, you have to look at that language and see what's called tuition only. And when that applies, then there are different factors into that. A couple of the MUS awards that kind of come in that you might be eligible for also have some parameters on those or how they can apply and based on need and some other things that go along with that. The most dynamic award that we have for non-residents is called the WUI Award, and that's the Western Undergraduate Exchange Award for that. That is by application only. So you will get invited to do that application, and that is due by January 6th of 2025. So for those of you who qualify for that, you need to be looking for that application, look at the admissions website for that criteria, and kind of see what goes with that. WUI is treated a little bit different. It is dynamic in the sense that it is not an award amount. The award amount is dictated by a different tuition assessment. So WUI students get charged or assessed 150% of the in-state rate. So that amount is a larger amount than the Achievement Award. And so that becomes our most highest non-resident award. In that application, this is your chance to shine. This is your chance to kind of show us who you are. Don't take that application lightly. Demonstrate who you are, demonstrate the things that you've been in. There is a committee or several committees that review those applications. And so you need to sell yourself to that committee and get there and to be able to be granted that award. Not everybody who applies gets that award. We offer a competitive part of that that is different than many other of our competitors. If they offer WUI, they generally offer it to anyone who's eligible for it based on just our experience. In our enrollment, we have a competitive nature for that and offer only a limited number of awards. Next slide, please. These are available for both in-state and out-of-state students. So college and departmental scholarships, that can be done. Most of MSU's awards or scholarships are done through one application called CAT Scholarships. It is an annual application that you have to do. It opens in November of every year with a priority deadline of February 1st. That doesn't mean you can't do it after February 1st, but many departments, when they're looking at pools of applicants, will limit that to a February 1st deadline and then go beyond that only if they have other awards and evaluation to make after evaluating those initial pools. So those awards are made by department, but you get one application that does most of our departmental or college applications. Many of those, just so that you're aware, are not leaned into based on your freshman status. A lot of those are based on your college performance. So while you get your Premier Achievement or some other award based on your high school GPA, many of the college or department scholarships through CAT scholarships are going to look at your college performance and what kind of moves into that and kind of how they go. That does not mean that you shouldn't do it as a freshman. We want you still to do that application because you never know what might actually turn up for you based on what that is. Departments evaluate applications all the way up until fall classes start, excuse me, and even into the semester after that. So please do the CAT scholarship application to give yourself the best chance. Outside scholarships. Those are pretty much contingent on the effort that you do, the applications that you make to different organizations that you're aware of. Could be high school organizations, could be work-related organizations, could be organizations that your parents are part of. But you need to kind of research, do some legwork on your own for these outside scholarships. And those can come in, and those only limit on those, on how many you have would be to maybe a standard cost of attendance, which we'll touch on here in just a little minute on kind of what that looks like. But that would be the only kind of parameter for that in terms of a cap on what you can have with those. So, but those are kind of done on your own. Financial education with Keith, they do a great job on kind of telling you how to do that every year. So please leg in with that as well. The presidential scholarship is also by application, has an application deadline of December 6th. That can go to a resident or non-resident, but it is a high achieving academic award. And you can see that by the GPA that's listed here and the application process. And you get full tuition waiver plus a housing stipend for those that apply for the presidential. And we'll boast on MSU a little bit. Our presidential scholarship program and the honors program that we have here is certainly one of the best, I think, that I've seen around for a long time. And many students are very well prepared for what they do after participating in that program, because not only is it about classes, but it's about getting involved and engaged with a lot of different things. So look at that if you meet those qualifications. Next slide, please. How do you know what you have? Well, one way to look at your scholarship offer, if you already have an offer in place, would be to go to your portal, and that's called your MyInfo login. And to do that, you need a net ID. And so in your admissions process is where you are obtained, or how you get instructions on how to claim that net ID. And that net ID takes you into the portal, and that is where you can kind of find what different kinds of awards you have. This portal is the same place where you will look for financial awards later on in those same places. So it's great for you to get kind of engaged and comfortable with the portal and your MyInfo account, because you see all kinds of different things there. As you can see toward the bottom there, you've got application for admission, general financial aid, all kinds of different things related to classes, all those things contained into your MyInfo account. But if you look at that, you scroll, you got to find financial aid, and then you find a scholarship section, and then you can look in there to see if you've been offered a Premier and Achievement. And you may have been offered an achievement and also do the WUI application. WUI decisions don't happen for later, so those decisions may change as you kind of go through the process. So you may have to look several times into your portal to kind of see activity that may be related to a letter that you have. But once you get a letter or something that notifies you of an award, you should be able shortly thereafter to kind of see it in the portal. Early on, some of that is contingent on the system actually being ready and for our ability to actually kind of engage into a new academic year in our system and be able to kind of post that to what's there. But we're pretty well caught up on that. So if that's not there, we would love for you to reach out to financial aid and talk to us about which letter you got and how come you may or may not be seeing that. So your Premier Achievement or WUI Scholarship Award will stack on top of other opportunities based on what they are. But again, going back to what I said a few minutes ago, that depends if they're classified as tuition only or what that might look like. So what you're looking for, though, is to kind of build on one award after another and kind of build into a process that gets as much of that cost of attendance or tuition fees, food and housing and all those kinds of things covered. So be aggressive, be proactive, kind of look at those things as you kind of walk through that part. Next slide, please. So now we're going to talk really kind of just about how financial aid blends into that scholarship piece, kind of what that looks like. And so we'll kind of get into what that looks like in terms of applying for and receiving other kinds of financial aid. So next slide. We look at higher education, and your time here is an investment in you. This is like kind of getting into a purchase of an automobile or purchase of a home. these have lifelong or at least long-term kind of benefits to you. So education is one of those things. It's easy to kind of get away with that, but you're here attending class, putting that investment to going to class, doing the homework and doing all those things, because those are the things that pay off for you in the future with the educational investment that you're making with what this is. So look at this as a long-term investment. This is a long-term growth plan. This is what gets you through longer period of time in terms of what that is. And the benefit of that isn't the next day, but it's longer down the road in terms of what that looks like. But the experience in itself is one thing, but that time to invest is kind of another place to go. So invest in yourself and be conscientious about the funds that are being used to kind of pay for this educational investment. Next slide. What we build on this. So looking at these costs and these different things, I talked a little bit before about a cost of attendance. And a cost of attendance is kind of what does it cost to go to school? That's kind of the bare bones piece of what that is. And that cost of attendance includes tuition and fees, food and housing or room and board, books and supplies, personal expenses, and transportation. And so let's talk about those for a minute. So tuition and fees are definitely direct expenses. Those are what you owe to Montana State University based on the classes that you enroll in and what those are and how many of those classes there are. That is a charge that goes directly on your bill. As new freshmen, you're required to be in the dorms or in student housing, and you have to, without exemption, go into one of those dorms. And because that's MSU sponsored, that will also be a direct expense for freshmen. But for continuing students, if you happen to leave campus and aren't in student housing anymore, room and board or food and housing then become part of an indirect cost, which means you are then kind of grabbing other financial aid to be able to kind of look at that process and kind of see where you can end up with doing that. Books and supplies, well, you would think they might be a direct cost. They're really an indirect cost because based on your schedule, you go to the bookstore, you buy online, you do a bunch of different things. So those books and supply costs will vary for you every semester and vary by student based on what those are. Tuition fees, room and board, they will depend largely on, again, what you enroll for or what housing room that you're in, depending on where that goes. Personal expenses and transportation, those are the most variable part of a cost of attendance. You've been living every day. Parents have been allowing you to live in their homes. They've been buying you food. They've been doing all these different things, clothes, medications, all these kinds of different things. Those are kind of the day-to-day costs that are personal and miscellaneous and transportation. So that's getting back and forth from whether it's a dorm or if you're off campus someplace else, getting to campus, traveling around campus, doing all these different things. So there's a modest allowance in for that. But while that's included in your cost of attendance generally, it is also part of a cost that you've already been incurring for several years. We just get to say you are allowed with financial aid to actually help you incur some of those costs that you may have already been experiencing otherwise. So that builds the cost of attendance for us. We add these things up, we break them down in direct costs and indirect costs, and then from there you kind of are able to manage how much financial aid you may need. If you just need to pay your bill, then you're looking at tuition and fees and room and board to be able to say, hey, these are my direct costs. I know I need to have this much. Books and supplies, personal and miscellaneous transportation can be used then otherwise and be much more of a gradual pace. You can work to cover some of those housings and where that goes. So yeah, I think you're right, Emily, with this slide here. So how do we determine what you're eligible for? We do that through one basic process, but you have to apply in order to be eligible for that. So go to the next slide, please. Or let's see, Emily, back up one, I guess, back up before that one. There we go, that one. This gives you an example of the cost of attendance or the tuition fees. There's a Montana resident column and a non-resident column, and resident tuition is different than non-resident tuition, as most of you probably already know. But that gives you an example of how we build those two different things, what direct and indirect are, and kind of how those roll into play. So if you were enrolled for this coming fall, as a Montana resident, you'd be looking to roughly cover about $22,000 worth of direct costs, and you would want aid to be able to pay that. Your Premier Award, whatever that might go, would go into kind of helping you meet those costs of that tuition and fees. And that's an annual cost. What you see here, that is not a semester cost. So cut everything you're seeing there in half to go semester by semester. Okay, now go into the next one, Emily, and then jump to the next one. So how do we know if you're eligible for aid? You get to do the free application for federal student aid. We've given you the web address here and the QR code to help you kind of get there. This is a federal form. This form has to be done annually, and your eligibility is determined on an annual basis for what that goes. It uses income that you have to be able to kind of apply for that. But this is a free application, and it's from the Department of Federal Education or Federal Student Aid. So you're seeing that part there, right there. Typically, this application opens in October. Last year for 2024-25, Federal Student Aid overhauled the application, and we've been going through a revamped application process. And because of that, it opened in late December last year. It's going to open early December. We're expecting it to open December 1st, if not a little bit earlier this year. So Thanksgiving weekend might be a good time to kind of be prepared and kind of jump into that as a possible opportunity to start doing the FAFSA form and get that process started and get ready to apply for financial aid with that process as we go. Next slide. While that application on the FAFSA is the most important part of that application, in order to be able to do that, you need to first have a user ID and password. Some people call that an FSA ID. You can call it username and password, but with banking, with anything else that you have sometimes on your phones, you have to have a user ID and password in order to get into an app, right? This is the same thing. In order to get into the FAFSA, you have to have a user ID and a password in order to do that. This QR code will give you access to be able to look at how to create that and what to do. When you get into the FAFSA, one of the new changes that were made for this revamped FAFSA was that student goes into their own path. And so the student gets to go into the application, they get to do their part. The FSA ID is then what becomes your signature enabled to do that. And not only is it a signature on the FAFSA, but it becomes your ID for all kinds of federal processes. So if you borrow loans, it becomes how you get into your loans, so your payments and all those kinds of different things as you move down the road. So this has a lot of different uses as you move down the road for you as the student. Contributors. Contributors are invited into the new FAFSA form by the student, and that is more than likely a parent or parents, depending on how the tax filing has gone for that. But they are invited by the student once the student completes their section. So contributors or parents, as we'll talk about here, you also need to have an FSA ID. So it's important that you go get one. This is not the same as a student. You have to have your own unique ID, and you get to get into the application through the invitation, and then you get to kind of go down that path and fill out your own part of the application really without seeing the student part, and fill that out. And if that's done, that can be done jointly as one set of parents, or two as we kind of go down that process. Yeah, stay here for a minute. That'd be good. Part of what the new application does and why this is kind of so tight with these lanes. So you have a student lane, a parent lane, maybe a parent two lane, or a student lane and a student spouse lane. These are all kind of combinations that kind of go in with this new application. Part of what's driving this is the income grab from this. So part of what's happened with this new revamped process is that we're going directly. FAFSA is going directly in collaboration with the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, and grabbing income information. So your consent when you do this application is saying, I agree to go out to the IRS and grab this information and bring it back in to the FAFSA form. It's called a direct data exchange with the IRS. If you filed income tax, you have to use this process. If you didn't file income taxes, it's not going to ask you to use this process. But the lanes and kind of the contributor process, all still the same, but it's contingent on whether or not you've actually filed a tax return for 2 years prior. It's called a prior year process. So look for that. But before you can do the FAFSA, please do the FSA ID and get that done first, because otherwise you cannot actually finish the FAFSA if you aren't able to sign it and complete that process. And what we learned from last year's students and parents is that if you're in that process and if parents don't have that yet, and it just kind of bogs down the flow of the process. So I'm encouraging you strongly to do the FSA ID first, get that done, then jump into the FAFSA, and then the invitations and the consent and all those different things that need to happen work a lot smoother. So financial aid is here to help you in that process with that application. You can call, you can email us. We'll be going to different places around the state, even around different places to do high school nights, all those kinds of different things. So if you need help, please reach out and ask. It is different, it's new, and because it's new for many of you, the first time through is always going to be a little challenging. And we hope as we move through the second, third, and fourth years, that it becomes a little bit easier for you to do. Parents, if you already have another student in college and you've already got one of these FSA IDs, you don't need another one. It will work for multiple students at the same time. You just have to have your own unique one to receive and then sign the application after the consent and the invitation has been done. Okay, next slide, please. We talked a little bit about this already, so I won't spend a lot of time here, but the new process is a better FAFSA, better future. The application is streamlined. It's supposed to reduce barrows. It's supposed to create a better user experience. I'll be honest with you, the Department of Ed didn't do us any favors last year. It was not a good experience for both students, families, and definitely for us as schools. For us to be able to help you was a challenge and do a bunch of different things. So they're working really hard. This is why it's not open in October this year again, is because they're working really hard at doing some testing, making sure that users are having the experience that they need, and those kinds of things are flowing better for that. So we expect a much better process than that, but we're eager to hear from you on what your experience is like. So please share that experience. We can communicate back. We can share what users are experiencing with the Department of Ed, and we want to do that. So please feel free, good, bad, or otherwise, to share your experience with us and let us know what that looks like. Next slide. Verification. So this is a quality control instrument based on certain elements that are kind of proprietary to federal student aid. But they can pick an application based on parameters that they set or different things that don't make sense to them in the FAFSA flow process. And they kick that out to the institution and they tell us that we need to verify the information. So the verification selections right now are not very high. So you may not see this, but if you do, it means that we need to collect some extra documentation from you. So be on the lookout for communication from Montana State Financial Aid that says, hey, we need a couple things for you. And if we do, we're going to point you to a page. Next slide. And that page is on our website. It's called a forms link, and it's going to give you information to where it's really probably going to be, tell us a little information about your household size. You might have to turn in a tax return copy and give us those things along with that. We have an upload feature on our site though, but be aware that that is a possibility that exists. Also be aware that doesn't mean that you've done anything wrong. It's a quality control instrument from the federal student aid. It could just be a random selection. So be attentive to that as we kind of move down the line here. Next slide. Once we have all that in place, then we're going to award you financial aid. And those financial aids can form in the system of scholarship, grants, loans, or work study. Work study is something you have to ask for right now. The application doesn't address that issue or question that says you're interested in it. But once you get your award, if you're interested in work study, please give us a call. We can tell you if you're eligible or not, and then we can direct you on the process for how to kind of go establish where to find a job, how to get that, and what your employer needs to do to manage that work study process. Scholarships go back to what we talked about earlier. Those can be Premier, Achievement, WUI is that assessment, but it's still kind of labeled as a scholarship. And those things all go. Grants would be either federal or state grants. We have a few of those around, but the federal Pell Grant is the main grant that's there, but that's free money. That's stuff you don't have to pay back. Scholarship, money you don't have to pay back. That's gift. Work study is something you earn that you kind of go through the process with. Don't have to pay anything back. Excuse me on that. Loans are something that you do have to kind of use that help you kind of pay as you go, and it is something you have to be considerate about and look at as you go. We're here to help you with that process, discuss what those options are. You will more than likely see them on your award, but you have to choose to accept those or not, and choose to use those toward meeting those cost of attendance items or not. So we're here to have that discussion with you to kind of help you decide where those costs are, what those direct elements are, and then determine whether or not you have enough aid to kind of get there and manage that. And we encourage you to borrow responsibly, right? That's our big goal. Borrow only what you need to kind of get through. There is a max amount for what's there, but you get to decide on how much you get to use or how much other personal savings otherwise you get to have. So next slide. Just some important dates here. I know Keith is going to hit on a bunch of these too, and we've already went through those, so I won't spend a lot of time here. But we have preferential deadlines, and we want to say that because you're going to see an application opens and you're going to see a preferential filing date. But neither of those mean that the application is closed. So both the FAFSA and CAT scholarships can be completed after those preferential filing dates. We still want you to do them, again, because we're trying to get you information. So what this does, those preferential dates just get you into priority consideration for limited funds in terms of what those look like, but they don't, certainly aren't the end all be all for saying I shouldn't do those if you miss those dates. So be attentive to that. Next slide. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Keith, and he will take you the rest of the way there.
Thanks, James. Let's see if I can put this on my Bobcat sweatshirt here. Big football week coming up. My name is Keith Hamburg. I serve as a senior financial coach in an office here on campus called the Office of Financial Education. Work very closely with James and his team. Go ahead and hit the next slide, please. So just real quick, if you're ever on campus, our office is located in the basement of the sub. On the left-hand side of the screen is the Office of Financial Education. We're part of the Allen Yarnell Center for Student Success, which is about 10 feet to the east of my office. Next slide, please. So a lot on this slide and a lot of logos, but just letting you know that our mission is to help students not only figure out how to pay for school, but while they're in school, things like credit and budgeting and Parent Plus loan counseling, salary negotiations as you get closer to graduation. We do Scholarship 101 clinics with Chris Williams from Financial Aid or James. We talk about public service loan forgiveness. Our bread and butter is one-on-one financial coaching. Many have heard this from me almost every time I talk to a group of people, and that is that finances are an individual sport. So we want to work with you, the students, the parents, because everyone's in a little bit different situation, in state, out of state, et cetera. So please, next slide. So I kind of already mentioned that we're part of the Allen Yarnell Center for Student Success. One of the things I wanted to let you know is we have career coaches, we have success advisors, we do tutoring through our office, but particularly the Office of Financial Education. We do some team peer mentoring. We have peers who work with us, students who've gone through pretty intensive training so they can help their fellow students with how to pay for school, et cetera. Next slide. So preparing for FAFSA, we're going to go through this pretty quick because James has talked about it, but one of the things, especially if MSU is in serious consideration, along with our friends in financial aid, we do a paying for school for incoming freshmen and their families starting in April, May, June, and July. We do this during orientation, but what grew out of the pandemic for us was a way to get out information in April versus when you're getting ready to come to school in August. We also help you with, even though this is in the financial aid area, just making sure that everything is set. Have you accepted your scholarships? Have you, if you're taking student loans, have you done what you see on the screen, which is entrance counseling and signing your master promissory note? Just making sure that everything is in order. And stealing this from James's coworker, Chris, but when we did a clinic last month, there were like 90 scholarships that were offered that people didn't accept. So kind of blows my mind as a financial coach that you're not going to accept free money. So we just want to make sure you've checked all the boxes, done thank you notes, or what have you. Next slide, please. Again, as James mentioned that I was going to talk about this, the CAT scholarship that opened up 20 days ago. If you're in a WUI state, you can't apply for WUI without doing CAT scholarship. So that's a great thing. If you're not in a WUI state or you're an in-state student, no matter what you are, whether you come from the western part of the United States, in-state or out of state, doing CAT scholarship. And as James mentioned, yes, you can do it after February 1st, but if your odds go down by doing it after February 1st, why not do it before? So keep an eye on those dates. We do clinics on these. Sometimes students will ask me to read over their essays, not my strong suit. Worked with a student at 3:30 today. When she was done with our one-on-one appointment, she went right over to the writing center and had them review her essay. Next slide, please. So James had mentioned this a little bit. So for those out of state, this is for in-state students only. So we have a program called the Hilleman Scholars Program. It is a 4-year scholarship. You can see this doesn't necessarily cover the money part, but in year 1, academics, personal and career exploration, internship experience, they all have one their sophomore year. Giving back to the university the 3rd year, and then of course, giving back to their state and their community. These are for Montana residents who will graduate from high school. That should be 2025, sorry about that. And one of the requirements is to be a Pell Grant eligible student. Most will be invited, but for those on the webinar, if you don't get an invitation, it doesn't mean that you can't apply. So for more information, you go out to montana.edu, you put in Hilleman Scholars. But this is not only a money scholarship, but a leadership program designed specifically for Montana's future leaders. Next slide, I believe, is going to, if you would please, show us just giving you an idea of where they come from in the state of Montana. The program started in 2016, so we will actually be doing our 10th cohort next year. So again, talk to your high school counselor if you're in Montana. Some will be asked by the president to apply for the program, but the application it will be live starting January 1st for the fall of 2025. Next slide, please. And that's the last slide. So because James and I may answer questions together, maybe we'll just attempt to, we'll just attempt to sit here together. Come on over, James. So Emily, if you would like us to just sit here and see if people either are gonna unmute, or if you wanna, or Anders or anyone wants to give us some of the questions that maybe have been asked in the chat.
Yes, we actually had some students ask some really great questions. One of the questions that I think is super helpful is a payment plan an option for students? And if so, how do they work?
Yeah, definitely a payment plan is an option. I have a process where you pay an initial payment. They'll break down the total bill that you have into 4 installments, and then you pay at the beginning of each month or middle of each month. I'm not exactly sure the date, but yes, there is a payment plan if you're not using any other resources, or to supplement the balance that you have left. So if you have just like a Premier and Achievement Award, that knocks down part of it, you can payment plan the rest of the charges on your account, yes.
But one thing I would add, James, is there is a fee to do that, but MSU does not, our student accounts office does not charge interest. So using easy math, if your gap is $4,000 and you want to go on a payment plan, it would be a fee of $50, no interest charged on that. 4 payments would be divided into $1,000 a payment.
Awesome. I used a payment plan personally as a student, and it was super helpful. So I recommend it to a lot of students. And then one of the other questions is, whose tax information do I use if my parents are separated and have joint custody?
A very common question. And the application on the FAFSA is going to ask you for which parent ever provides the most financial support. And even with joint custody, you still have to choose a parent then that provides the most financial support. You can determine that any way you want. We're not going to score that or try to get into the details of what that is, but you will eventually have to pick at least the parent that provides the most financial support.
And then one of the other questions I've been seeing a lot is, how do students apply for the WUI and the Presidential Scholarship through the General CAT Scholarships application? A lot of questions on if it's a bunch of separate applications. James, could you just go a little bit more in depth on what a student can expect when finding those applications?
Yeah, you have to get into the application. In CAT scholarships, there's the core application called the general application. You have to do that first. And that kind of is just a lot of other student general detail. And then you will get the option of either searching for, or you'll get a selection based on the general stuff that you put out to apply for either the presidential or the WUI part. So you can search for that indirectly, but if you haven't done the core part of the general app first, you won't see it. So we generally run into problems where students just do the first part with their name and then try to finish, but you got to finish the general application part first. Then you should be able to get into the following subsequent applications to apply for those different awards.
All right, perfect. And then we've been getting a lot of questions in the Q&A about what tax year are you looking, or is FAFSA looking for?
And I fumble this all the time. So I believe it's going to be 2020. Keith is helping me. He's saying it's 2023 for the 25-26 application. So that's correct. Yep.
Perfect.
So it's called a prior year. They're using taxes that have already been filed. It used to be the previous year, and then many students and parents and families hadn't even applied or done their taxes yet. So that income wasn't available. By using a prior year, it's going back to that. So you can apply in October because those taxes have already been done. So when the application gets back to October, or even now in December, when you get into it in the next 30 days, those taxes are ones that have already been done.
Awesome. And then another FAFSA question. If my family filled out the old FAFSA for my older siblings and didn't receive any aid, should we still consider filling out the new FAFSA?
The mantra that we send out is always do the FAFSA. I know when we talk about when I didn't get anything, loans are something. It's part of a financial aid package, and that may not be what you want to see. But the other part of that is let's be prepared. Let's give you the best options that we can. You can choose not to accept those that are there, but to put yourself in the best position available, we still recommend highly that you do that. Flip that over into the CAT scholarship arena, right? There's an indicator in the CAT scholarships that the reviewers get to see. You don't get to see it, but when your application data is pulled for the reviewers in a college to look at, they get to see whether or not you've done a FAFSA, and they get to see in an indicator what that need level might be. They don't get the exact part, but they get a measurement. And so as they compare students in a review, they might use that in terms of being there. So it might give you a leg in to a scholarship award as well. So just know that in advance.
James, I know CAT scholarship is run through financial aid, but I would just tell you on a personal basis and all my clients that I see that whether you need student loans or not, I've made both my children, my daughter graduated in 2019 and my son is a sophomore here. They apply for FAFSA for CAT scholarship. If there's a requirement in a particular scholarship, and there's many in CAT scholarship, and one of them is FAFSA, they can't make you take a student loan. It just gives you your best chance at CAT scholarship. I'm sure you would agree with that.
Yeah, to elaborate on that, I mean, you can, when because I mentioned it earlier that, CAT scholarships is highly academic in what that is. And the colleges and departments are awarding their academic merit awards. All true. But when you get down into evaluating a pool, they're looking at maybe 50 people to award 10 awards to, right? That's an exaggeration made up, but give them the best and the most information that they can to make that decision. And that can be one of those elements.
Awesome. And then if a student fills out FAFSA, when can they expect to see their aid package from Montana State?
We generally are ready with our system and everything else to begin awarding those in late February or early March. So you have to be a little bit patient. You will get a communication that says, we've got your FAFSA, and then we've got to build in a bunch of different things and get everything kind of caught up. But we start sending out awards in late February, early March every year.
And then one of the questions we got in the form is, are there any special circumstances if a family or a student's financial situation has changed drastically in the last year?
Yes, we do have there is a process for that, and we do have a built-in process within the office and an appeal process to be able to do that. So we need you to contact us if that's the case. We need to go through the FAFSA process as it stands. front facing as it is. Then once we have that and it's all done, then we can look at actually making some changes to that. So that's when we need you to reach out to us, have a conversation with us, share with us what's happened, probably have you do an appeal form and submit some documentation, and then we can make changes.
Awesome. And then one question we got on the form as well is, can I accept a grant without accepting a loan?
Most definitely. Grants are generally automatically accepted for you so that we don't put you into a situation of not accepting the grant. So rarely do we have somebody say, I don't want the grant, but we accept grants on your behalf, that and scholarships that come through.
Awesome. And then one of the questions I've been seeing a lot in the chat is, where can students find additional scholarships to help make paying for school a little bit more affordable? So anything that anything that might not be need-based, as I've seen a lot.
Absolutely. And great question. And I kind of go back to my office and James's office doing 3, 4, 5 Scholarship 101 clinics. And one of the things we talk about, in-state, reach higher, MUS is a great place to look for in-state students. And Chris Williams in James's office will often recommend places that have actually sent us scholarship money. There's 2 of them that she recommends in these clinics outside of CAT scholarship and reach higher for those in-state students. And that is scholarshipamerica.org. And then an app that used to be called My Scholly was bought by the private loan company Sallie Mae, and they have those scholarships. I worked with a student today who had applied for numerous within. It's called Sally. So instead of Sallie Mae, it's just Sally. You would just Google search Sally scholarships instead of My Scholly, because they bought that app. And those are 2 places that we recommend. I would also say this, because we talk about this in our Scholarship 101 clinic. And James mentioned a little bit, your parents' work, your local civic organization from your town, Montana or outside of Montana. When I say civic organizations, your Lions Club, your Elks Club, your Kiwanis Club, okay? All of a sudden, $750 might not sound like a lot, but that could be, your books for the next 3 semesters or something. So certainly look in your town, work with your either guidance counselor in Bozeman. It's called the Career Center, and they often will have that information for those local scholarships. You agree with that? Anything to add there?
Absolutely there. I think the only thing I wanted to add into that is be very cautious about paying a company or doing anything like that. Those rarely are produce anything of value. If you pay something for that, rarely have I seen somebody get their own value out of what they actually paid into that. So I'm going to recommend not paying for it, but if you're looking at something like that and they want you to pay for a search, be very cautious about that.
Good to know. One of the questions from the chat that I think it would be really helpful is, you both have done a really great job of encouraging students to reach out with individual questions. One parent asked if parents are still able to reach out to you guys with questions, even if their student will be a minor at the start of the school year or any part of that financial aid process.
Yeah, they do become students and adults once they kind of get and generate to campus. And then we have a Family Educational and Rights Privacy Act thing we have to go through with being able to do that. But prior to that, prior to anything like that, we can talk all day in generalities, right? So there are many, many things that we can get through a large deal of conversation, because we're just talking about a lot of what ifs, right? What if this is my situation? We can talk about that all day long without getting into the specifics of the FAFSA and anything like that. So yeah, absolutely. We're here to talk.
Awesome. And then, are parents able to reach out to financial aid how are parents able to reach out to financial aid once their student is officially a student at Montana State?
That was the FERPA, or the Family Education Rights. That's a FERPA form that the student allows a parent with a password to be able to get in or allow us to have a conversation with them. So that same process works for both financial aid and student accounts. So when you're here on campus, doing orientations or anything like that, we throw that form in front of the student, get them to put on it, and then parents, when you call, we're going to ask you for the password, and then we can talk. Again, but otherwise, if you don't have that or that's not ready, we can be pretty clear about situational kind of stuff and probably give you a pretty good idea of an answer to a question even without that. But the FERPA is the process we'll need to do once the student gets on campus.
Emily, can I add something real quick? Just
Yeah, of
because my
course.
office doesn't share the same FERPA form, but between April and August, we meet with hundreds of families, often via WebEx. And while I can't specifically say what the financial aid award, often the student is on the WebEx with them and they have the letter in front of them, then we can talk. This is how this would work. This is how the scholarship would get applied. In terms of cost, we can talk about that. We don't need a FERPA for that because the costs are listed on our website. So to James's point, while we can't get into specifics, we go over other ways to pay for school. How do we use a 529 plan? What if grandma wants to pay and how do you make her an authorized payer? We can go through every one of those steps with both students and parents.
Awesome. And then we have a parent asking, and I think this is super helpful. We mentioned that students have to initiate the process. Is that correct? That students have to initiate the process and then invite the parent?
It will work a lot easier if that's the case. I can't say that's 100% true, but out of the experience from last year, when we had parents initiate the process without the invitation from the student, the whole application process did not flow well. So it is highly, again, recommended, while it isn't a fast rule, but that the student get through their part of the application first, they do their consent, and then they invite the contributors into the application.
Okay. And then if a parent has, let's say, started their done the parent part of FAFSA, and their student has it, what would be your advice as far as next steps?
Student needs to have their user ID and password, and they need to be able to find that application in the federal system. And if they can do that and get locked into that, the process can work. So they just need to get their own user ID and password and then see if they can't line up those two different kinds of applications, make sure they're in the same one.
Awesome.
James, I would add, and this is stealing from his coworker Barb, who she and I often do orientation together. It doesn't mean that we can't talk to you or help you through the process. Hey, this didn't work. But the one thing Barb always suggests is for the student to keep an eye on their email, right? That's how the James's office can email you and say your FAFSA award. And sometimes like, we haven't heard from your financial aid office. Email.
Student will get that communication too, because they're the primary on the FAFSA. So if something is coming from federal student aid, that communication is most likely also going to be part of a student application. So student needs to jump in as quickly as they can if parents already started one of those. For that, I would that so that there is time to kind of work through any challenges that might come up with lining those two things up.
Awesome. That is super helpful. One question I see a lot of is, can WUI be stacked with the Achievement Award?
The answer to that is no. WUI becomes a tuition assessment and has its value only in the fact that it's 150% of residential tuition assessment. So you don't get to keep both. If you're awarded the WUI, you've got a higher award than your achievement, and that is what you end up with.
CAT scholarship though.
CAT scholarship, if you have some other outside awards or other different theses like that, yes, those are built on.
Great. And then another question we saw a lot in the chat is, if I am doing Running Start in high school, are they still eligible to apply for all of those first year scholarships?
Yes.
Awesome. And then another question is, do you need FAFSA to be completed before you apply for WUI or the presidential scholarship?
Not required, no. So if those deadlines exist, you saw those on that other slide, make sure that you do those applications by those deadlines, regardless of having a FAFSA done or not.
Perfect. And then we've had a couple questions about work study. James, could you talk about what work study looks like at Montana State?
Work study is kind of a benefit to both the student and the institution. So to the student, it allows them a place to work on campus. 90% of the jobs are on campus. There is some community service work and different things like that that can be done off campus, but largely it finds you positioned to get attached to on campus. The advantage to the institution is that the employer. So if I'm going to hire a work study student, I could hire one student hourly, pay them a wage that would eat up my budget. Because federal work study would match a student employment job with work study, I could hire 3 students instead of 1. So what work study does is create opportunities across campus for jobs to be open. And then creates a relationship for students to be able to, one, work, but also have an attachment with the institution.
James, will you just mention real quick about Hire a Bobcat and how they look for employment?
Yeah, there are a number of different ways, but there is one path that is predominantly used, which is called Hire a Bobcat. Employers across campus will use that tool. They'll post a job in there. Students log into that, they get their own access, and then it will filter jobs out for them to be able to look for that. But the standard old just moving around campus, talking to somebody and saying, do you have any jobs? Are you looking for anybody to work? Is as successful as most other things. So students got to ask around for it too. That's probably one of the best ways, because once you establish a relationship with somebody, it's just a good positive thing.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that clarification. I think that is all of our questions for the evening. Keith, James, thank you so much for being here this evening and answering our questions. And thank you everybody for joining us. We will be sending out a recording of this webinar in the next few days, if not tomorrow. But if you have any questions, please feel free to contact admissions, Keith, James, or anyone in admissions, and we'll be happy to help. Thank you so much, and everyone have a great night.